Hello students. In the previous video, that is part 2 of the lesson on saying please, we have seen how Alfred Gardiner gives us the example of the polite conductor who is very gentle and kind to his passengers. In this video, we shall see how our courtesy and manners can create good atmosphere around us. A few days after, my most sensitive toe was trampled on rather heavily as I sat reading on the top of a bus. I looked up with some anger and more agony and saw my friend of the cheerful countenance. Sorry, sir, he said. I know these are heavy boots. Got them because my own feet get trod on so much, and now I'm treading on other people's. Hope I didn't hurt you, sir. He had hurt me, but he was so nice about it that I assured him he hadn't. After this, I began to observe him whenever I boarded his bus, and found a curious pleasure in the constant good nature of his bearing. He seemed to have an inexhaustible fund of patience and a gift for making his passengers comfortable. I noticed that if it was raining, he would run up the stairs to give someone the tip that there was room inside. With old passengers, he was as considerate as a son, and with children, as solicitous as a father. Now, here, Alfred Gardiner is again narrating another incident. Soon after the previous incident, it so happened that the same conductor accidentally stepped on the author's toe, causing him much pain. But the cheerful conductor was quick to apologize, saying that he had got those heavy boots on because his toes were often trod on. Yet, ironically, he himself was now stepping on people's toes. When he asked Gardiner if he were hurt, the latter reassured him that he was not, even though in point of fact he was. What is illustrated here is the effect of politeness and how good behavior brings out good behavior in others too. From that incident onwards, the author begins to take note of the polite conductor and his actions. He seems to have a limitless supply of patience and goodwill towards his passengers, and as caring as a son to the elderly and as a father to the children, he goes out of his way to make passengers comfortable. He had evidently a peculiarly warm place in his heart for young people, and always indulged in some merry jest with them. If he had a blind man on board, it was not enough to set him down safely on the pavement. He would call to Bill in front to wait while he took him across the road or round the corner, or otherwise safely on his way. In short, I found that he irradiated such an atmosphere of good temper and kindliness that a journey with him was a lesson in natural courtesy and good manners. What struck me particularly was the ease with which he got through his work. If bad manners are infectious, so also are good manners. If we encounter incivility, most of us are apt to become uncivil. But it is an unusually uncouth person who can be disagreeable with sunny people. It is with manners as with the weather. Nothing clears up my spirits like a fine day, says Keats, and a cheerful person descends on even the gloomiest of us with something of the benediction of a fine day. And so it was always fine weather on the polite conductor's bus, and his own civility. His conciliatory address and good humored bearing infected his passengers. In lightening their spirits, he lightened his own task. Now, what is the author trying to tell us here? He's trying to say that by letting people on the top know that there are seats lower down when it rains, or by cracking jokes with young people to make them laugh, or to set down a blind person up on the footpath and safely on his way, the polite conductor always exuded good temper and kindliness that Gardiner says that a journey with him taught one what natural courtesy and good manners were. Gardiner then goes on to show us the benefit of such behavior. The polite conductor never had any difficulty in doing his work. Just as rudeness begets rudeness, likewise a sunny disposition begets pleasantness in others. Here he mentions the poet Keats, who has claimed that he always felt cheerful when the weather was sunny, and says Gardner, cheerful people come to us like the blessing of sunny weather. Consequently, the atmosphere inside this particular conductor's bus was always pleasant. His politeness, his readiness to accommodate, his pleasant manner of conducting himself resulted in making his passengers happy, which in turn made his own work easy. That is why Gardiner points out that his politeness was not a waste but a very good investment. His gaiety was not a wasteful luxury but a sound investment. I have missed him from my bus route of late, but I hope that only means that he has carried his sunshine on to another road. It cannot be too widely diffused in a rather drab world, and I make no apologies for writing a panegyric on an unknown bus conductor. If Wordsworth would gather lessons of wisdom from the poor leech gatherer on the lonely moor, I see no reason why lesser people should not take lessons in conduct from one who shows how a very modest calling may be dignified by good temper and kindly feeling. It is a matter of general agreement that the war has had a chilling effect upon those little everyday civilities of behavior that sweeten the general air. We must get those civilities back if we are to make life kindly and tolerable for each other. We cannot get them back by invoking the law. The policeman is a necessary symbol, and the law is a necessary institution for a society that is still somewhat lower than the angels. But the law can only protect us against material attack, nor will the liftman's way of meeting moral affront by physical violence help us to restore the civilities. Now, what is he telling us here? Although sad that the polite conductor is no longer on his route, the author hopes that it means that he has carried his cheerfulness to another route. The world at large is a rather dull place, he says, and so much cheerfulness needs to be spread as widely as possible. Moreover, the author here is not apologetic about writing a piece in praise of an unknown conductor. He feels that just as William Wordsworth, the English romantic poet, could learn lessons from the humble leech gatherer and the lonely moor, ordinary people too could learn from a man who elevated his modest job through good temper and kindness. There is a general feeling that the World War has taken away from the man's daily life the use of civility that had made life sweet earlier. Gardiner asserts that those civilities must be restored to make life with one another easier. This cannot be done with the help of policemen or the law, which are necessary for creatures like man who are far from perfect, whereas the law can only protect us from physical injury. The liftman's way of retaliating against rudeness with physical violence too is ineffectual. I suggest to him that he would have had a more subtle and effective revenge if he had treated the gentleman who would not say please with elaborate politeness. He would have had the victory not only over the boor but over himself, and that is the victory that counts. The polite man may lose the material advantage, but he always has the spiritual victory. I commend to the liftman a story of Chesterfield. In his time, the London streets were without the pavements of today, and the man who took the wall had the driest footing. I never give the wall to a scoundrel, said a man who met Chesterfield one day in the street. I always do, said Chesterfield, stepping with a bow into the road. I hope the liftman will agree that his revenge was much more sweet than if he had flung the fellow into the mud. Now, here I remember what Mahatma Gandhi said: an eye for an eye would make the world blind. Here, too, Gardiner is trying to tell us the same thing. If we are also harsh to the people who are harsh to us, then we will never be able to see a change in the society that we live in. Hence, here he suggests that the liftman, instead of being harsh with the person who just said top, if he would have shown politeness towards him, then definitely he would have won over that harsh person or that rude person. Gardiner suggests here that if rudeness were to be replied to with excessive politeness, then sweet revenge might be had while retaining one's moral superiority. He calls it the victory over oneself, the only victory that matters to end the peace. He recounts the story of the witty Lord Chesterfield for the edification of the liftman. There are a time when the streets of the city were very muddy, and the only way of keeping one's shoes clean was by walking as close as possible to the wall, where a very narrow strip of ground was a little higher than the rest of the road. Here Chesterfield came face to face with an uncouth fellow who refused to step into the mud to allow Chesterfield to pass. I never give away to a scoundrel, is what he said. But Chesterfield immediately stepped into the mud with a bow, saying, I always do. So here he shows two contradictory behaviors. One of the person who was not allowing Chesterfield to pass, and the other of Chesterfield who was ready to get onto that muddy road and allow the other person to pass. Gardiner hopes that the liftman will understand that this revenge was much better than throwing the fellow into the mud. So here, Gardiner concludes his essay by saying that we all definitely come across such kind of situations. We do come across people who are rude and insensitive, but that does not mean that we also should behave the same with them. If they are rude, then we should win them over with our politeness. If they are insensitive, then we need to be sensitive towards them. Only then we can bring a change in the society. We can make a difference, and let us hence think about our actions, about our words, and pledge that we must not hurt anybody, may it be a person who is known to us or unknown. Let us spread kindness and politeness and use the magic words as much as possible. Thank you. Have a nice day.